Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cloudly Conversations. And this time I'm so excited to bring with you three remarkable speakers. You've met Eric and Suren in the past, but this is the first time that we have Cindy over here. She has written a new book called The AI Precipice, a really exciting book that I'm following through reading on Cindy, scrambling through all the different chapters. So excited to have all of you all over here. Thank you so much for joining this podcast. And yeah, I feel like before I get into and give you all the space, I wanted to some justice and give you all the introduction that you all deserve. So, to start with Cindy, since you're the new one over here, Dr. Cindy Gordon is the founder and CEO of Sales Choice. It's a Toronto based AI company that builds two products: Sales Insights, which is a predictive forecasting platform on the Salesforce ecosystem, and Mood Insights, a particularly interesting product that you must look at. This is for the viewers, which is a generative AI tool for real time employee engagement alongside an AI advisory practice. She holds a doctorate in complexity sciences from the University of Toronto and has an honorary doctorate in applied AI from George Brown College, where she teaches AI ethics and law. Phew, that's already a lot. Her career has spanned senior leadership roles at Xerox, Citicorp, and Accenture, where she was a global leading partner, leading large CRM transformations, followed by a period as a venture capitalist before founding Sales Choice. She has been named the top CEO of the year in AI and ethics by the International Association of Professionals, has received the Governor General's Award for Innovation and Community Leadership, sits on the board of advisors of the United States Artificial Intelligence Institute, and is a regular Forbes contributor on AI leadership and governance. She's the author of 16 books. Her newest book, the one that we just spoke about, The AI Precipice, an executive guide to balancing AI innovation and safety, is the one that's released, the one that you must all read. Her weekly newsletter, AI Insights, is read by leaders across North America. We're so glad to have you here, Cindy, just to have someone with that opinion, that experience, and above all, just so humble. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thanks, Atisha and Saran and Eric. Looking forward to the conversation. I think the topic's very timely.
It is very timely. Moving on to Eric, someone that you've seen around, someone that whose posts are going to make you feel warm and fuzzy. Eric Treshfield has worked in the Salesforce ecosystem since 2009 and is widely known in the community as the Kevin Beacon of Salesforce. Any of you who've been following him on LinkedIn know that about him. He was inducted into the Salesforce MVP Hall of Fame in 2020, a recognition reserved for the most enduring contributors of the community. He founded the Southern Indiana Salesforce User Group in 2010 and Midwest Dreaming in 2011, now, which is one of the largest community led Salesforce conferences in the world, and started the Dreamforce Newbie Breakfast, which has welcomed thousands of first time attendees into the ecosystem. He's currently an independent consultant helping ISV partners grow their brand through marketing and community initiatives. He brings to the conversations that very few panels capture the perspective of someone who has spent 15 years inside the day to day reality of practitioners, mentors, community builders. He sees enterprise adoption from the user group room, not the boardroom, bringing a very unique perspective that has proved against the test of time. Thank you so much, Eric, for being over here. And there's so much that we need to learn from you. Thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure to be here, Atisha.
And finally, my boss, Suren Reddy. Suren Reddy is the founder and CEO of Cloudly, which he established in 2013. The company today is approximately 80% Salesforce ecosystem and implementation, staff, augmentation and annual maintenance, and 20% its own agentic platform, which is an emerging direction that Suren plans to take and the vision that he has for the next chapter of the business. Cloudly operates across two geographies, the Bay Area and across India. Alongside Cloudly, Suren runs two purpose driven initiatives: a non-profit focused on community work in India, Shri Matrutva, and Save the Soil, an organic farming and regenerative agriculture initiative. His worldview combines an operator's pragmatism with a strong center to human centered technology, a perspective shaped in part by his own experience of loss, and the search for what truly matters and how we all build a business. Suren brings from this conversation the view from a CEO's chair. Someone who's simultaneously buying AI, selling AI, using AI in his workforce, and making decisions about what really matter to his people, to contribute to people, and to his clients, and overall bring an impact into the culture. Thank you so much, Suren, for being a part of it. And we're really looking forward to getting your unique perspective on this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So, shall I start with the questions now?
Yes.
And before that, I'm your host for this podcast, Atisha Rajpurit. I'm an AI engineer working at Cloudly. Apart from that, I like bringing AI conversations to the surface, just like the one that we're doing today. So, to start with y'all, just to introduce, just to warm up with the topic, Cindy, your book opens with this image of a precipice, which is the title of our podcast as well. A very powerful word, as we would say, but and very telling for the period that we are in today. Why do you feel that this word is relevant for today? Could you speak about this? And why is it the right word? Because it just felt like the most articulate word. Very well picked, I must say. But can you speak a little bit about that to us?
Well, it's amazing how much research you put into a book title. The rule of thumb is two words, or three. And the precipice was very purposely selected because we're at that point where we don't have good international regulation alignment across the globe in every single jurisdiction. It's something I can probe a little bit more lately. I mean, as we advance. But it creates a lot of friction as different businesses try to go into different jurisdictions when they have to be very, very mindful of the legal regulatory aspects. Like right now in the US, just as a simple example, we have over 100 different legal legislations. And so many companies just aren't aware of the landmines, in the sense they don't have the legal alignment. So that was one of the reasons. And I think the other factor is that we will have a lot of job loss. I'm happy to talk about it. And we really need to rev up the ecosystems to start planning. Our universities have to evolve. And, this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And I know we're going to go learn very much the hard way. And I know we're going to explore that. And I'll also talk about some of the positive attributions here. But we certainly aren't doing all of this right.
Thank you so much. I feel like you really captured the essence correctly. Eric, moving on to you, you've been a part of the Salesforce ecosystem since 2009. You've built a really beloved community conference, in the industry. From where you're sitting, what is happening about conversations, community, and what aspect of it is that is AI is missing, or that there is a gap that you're seeing in terms of community, in terms of what's happening with AI. What is your perspective on this? Because you're interacting with so many people on the day.
Yeah, I think the choice of Cindy's wording for one on the book, the use of the word precipice is a perfect choice, I think. And the one thing that first came to my mind that Cindy didn't really even mention was one of the definitions, if you will, at least in my mind, where you're standing at a precipice, like you're looking over a cliff, trying to figure out what's going to happen next, and you don't want to fall down into the cliff and get lost. And I feel like that's kind of the purpose of the community is to keep people on the top rather than having them fall over to the edge and go down the cliff. I think the perspective of where we are right now for AI and what community conferences and others are trying to do is to try to remind people that with all the benefits of AI, with all the automation that it can bring, there's still a place for the humans. You still have to keep the people around. You still have to keep those human factors and human feelings to some extent involved in the decision making process. Certain things AI can't do yet or can't do very well yet. That's probably going to change as the future progresses, of course. But I think that's probably the biggest aspect from a community perspective is just trying to remember there's people involved and the work that those people are doing is probably going to change based upon how AI impacts their jobs.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I feel like just keeping people at the forefront of it. Thanks, Eric. Suren, moving on to you. You build Cloudly across 12 years, two different continents, and you're watching this ecosystem change in real time and also two very different ecosystems, if I may. What is the question that's the most important for you as a CEO this year? What is it that, what is the precipice that you're seeing? What is the change that you're seeing in terms of navigating and how you're changing your view as a CEO and as a leader?
Okay. So we spoke with a lot of customers during the year and a half, and I think every CEO, as a matter of fact, every individual is having the same perspective on, like, today we have workers and uh, digital workers plus automations, and tomorrow combination of making the work with digital workers plus humans plus the new eras with the safeguards, guardrails, and all that, right? So everybody is kind of struggling to understand what is the revenue impact that we are going to have with a combination of humans plus agents. And second is the customer ROI, right? If every company organization has their customers, like, what ROI we are generating using a combination of humans plus agents. And the third thing is very important, like, what kind of the cultural impact this ecosystem is creating. Example, sometimes people have the bias saying that, okay, the agent we are building may take our jobs out and all, right? So in reality, we all know that, yeah, it will not take the jobs kind of completely out, but people will become smarter, and we make agents further smarter, and we generate the first three things that we talked about: revenue impact, and ROI for the customers, and also the balance, like how we can have relaxed lifestyle. Earlier here, kind of everybody used to struggle a lot of time, right? Now I think it should agents productivity should create the balance to have human beings a little bit of relaxed time.
Yeah, that actually is a very interesting perspective coming from a CEO wanting his employees and wanting people to relax. Very refreshing to hear, especially being your employee. Moving on to the next section, finally, the first section, which is AI Precipice through Leadership. There were some parts of your book that I was reading, Cindy, just about the importance of governance. And first of all, there is so much that is happening, right? There are so many metrics, but we've all probably heard about this that roughly 80% of enterprise AI projects fail. They never reach production. In fact, the average return on investment is under 5%. That's a scary number, with how much we hear about AI and there's so much noise, but the real distillation into what works is not happening. And I feel like an important point, Cindy, that you've been talking about is governance. There are two parts. There are these leaders who make the noise and who are talking about it and who want to implement AI and just want to move on with the speed of it. And then there's the other side of people who are actually pausing to ask the questions about governance, and the fact, and these are probably the ones that are getting some real meaningful work done. So, Cindy, with you working about so many years researching this book, what was the most uncomfortable finding that you found? Something that surprised someone like you, even with all the information and knowledge that you have? What was your learning? Like, give us that perspective, that even shocked you.
Well, I think the biggest observation was diving in, and I think you just summarized it, right? Because I think we echoed that in the book, was that less than 5% ROI across all of the ecosystem
Yes.
investments. And this is global research that's been integrated through many, many sources. So, first of all, on the governance front, you can have a great governance structure, but that still doesn't mean that you're going to pick the right use cases and that you're not going to invest significantly into the change transformation side. So we've had a lot of these initiatives that have been technology led. That's really kind of been the big learning for pretty well everybody if they're into the learning modality. And it can't be led by CTOs, CIOs. We really do need to bring a very strong business perspective and very much an enterprise wide value chain perspective across where are the best places to start end to end. And obviously, so much of the journey has been with crappy data, and people have really been working hard. And data management isn't a new topic. I mean, let's face it, right? This has been going on for years. Humans are really messy. But to get to AI transformation enablement, you cannot get there. So what's happened is it's really been a wake-up call where most people are, moving things to the cloud, right? Really taking an earnest efforts, putting in the infrastructure to actually
Mm,
label their data, being clear about accountabilities. And so that, I mean, this is a whole topic onto itself, but people, I really do think AI has been a wake-up call, because you cannot transform without some of the fundamentals. And even though data management, enterprise data management, like, has been going on for 30 or 40 years, quite frankly, right? I think back to the days when I was over at Citicorp, but you can't play in this arena if you don't really start taking some of these practices very seriously, and putting in the right machine learning ops infrastructure. But was it a big surprise? I think the return on investment was, um, you know,
Hmm.
the trillions of venture capital that have gone out into this market. I mean, I know that everybody's feeling a little bit edgy on returns right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. What do you see for the, if I have to just ask you out of the box that, how do you see the ROI on investments in AI being over the next year? Do you see similar trends, or do you feel like leadership is going to take more ownership because these conversations are happening now? What would your take be?
My take now is that there is a big shift going on. So
Hmm.
I think I would call it the euphoric views have eased off. And
Okay.
what's sinking in now is, how do we execute and scale so we're not in that 5%? And so leaders are asking the harder questions, and they're looking at their business cases and looking at what percentage of that investment is going to focus on the human and the change enablements and the change management practice, 30 to 40% shift. And so, that, I think, awareness is definitely becoming far more pervasive. And we're seeing a lot more focus now on how to productionalize this more seriously. Like, there's been lots of edge use cases done, but now it's, I think, a much more serious conversation and a much deeper understanding. A lot of people have educated the board, have a lot of educated the C level. So yeah, it's into, I think, a far more risk review process right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when people have finally lost so much money, they've realized that they need to do something with it. What better way than losing money to realize that you gotta pick yourself up and find new ways. But you're right about that, that I feel like that you're saying that moving into production, people are trying to really scale it up and now talk about it. And you said the word euphoric. That has gone. Now we're trying to look at it as not a magical tool, but how do we make this real? That's a very interesting perspective. Sureen, with you as a CEO, like just directly linking from Cindy because she's talking about leaders, and you've been, buying AI, selling AI, building AI. What are certain decisions that you're taking as a CEO to ensure that you're in the 5%, that the tools that you're building are working, that the agentic frameworks are working? What are leadership decisions that you have wrestled with? I have you noticed certain failures, and what are the changes that you've made, as a leader?
Yeah. So one point you mentioned about 5%, right? So that
Yeah.
5%, I don't agree on that 5% thing for two reasons, practical reasons.
Okay.
And also, second point I'd like to contradict is the money kind of, where did it go? It's wasted, right? So that's not wasted. We are investing for the future in mind. So that kind of going into this again, people invested in hardware, then software, then kind of into advanced technologies and all that, right? This is the investment engine that's running. The ROI may be longer, maybe 5, 10, 15 years. Like, if we are expect immediate ROI, kind of it becomes hard. But definitely I have seen productivity gains all over the employees as the individuals, whether we are addressing the 5% of the use cases, or 20% of the use cases, or 50% is up to business, as well as the IT leaders, and also top down and bottom up, right? Basically, there is a adoption, user adoption, as well as the exec adoption, and also giving that innovation a real run for the money, right? What we call it. So that is coming into play now, because the hard questions, as Cindy mentioned, right? Everybody is asking hard questions. Now it's the practical reality. You have to make it work, and all the investments has to yield the results. And in that process, I think definitely the main question coming is guardrails, and who is going to govern? Earlier we had governance, risk, compliance, right? In the process, I think only when human beings are there, it was hard to manage that. Now we are adding another two, three layers, like agents and different complex scenarios, right? That we are no one is aware of, right? What the behavior and all that, right? So in that case, what's happening is becoming complex in one side, and now GRC, governance, risk, compliance, with proven guardrails and safeguards, right? There is nothing has been defined, right? That's where I think I know, like what you guys are mentioning, 5% ROI, because we don't have any of these frameworks and guardrails and also checks and balances defined, and it's hard for us to go and kind of measure it, right? So now when is the time, a year from now, when you look at it, right, a lot of frameworks, a lot of platforms and all that will have these control centers, command centers, where they exactly know what is the productivity of individuals, what is the productivity of agents, what are the intruders or against people coming into the ecosystems, right? You'll measure each and everything and just make sure we are safer and kind of not losing the data, not losing the privacy side of it. Again, the checks, balances, and all that will come into a place where all the investment went in. Now we had to yield the results in a year to two.
That sounds very interesting, Suren. I like the perspective that you made that it's not money that's wasted, and then looking at the snapshot of a 5% return right now doesn't really make sense. Maybe this is something that is much more long term, and probably the ROI that we will see will be over the next few years, and we can't look at it immediately. That definitely shows that you have some long-term vision. That's a very interesting take that you have. Eric, coming to you finally, you watched leadership fail and succeed at Salesforce, in the Salesforce ecosystem for so many years. You know, Cindy mentioned data being an issue, and we've had this conversation before about messy data and all of it. With so much that is changing, but a lot that remains the same in terms of data, but so much that's changing with the AI ecosystem. What have you found that works within leader? What kind of leaders are getting it right? What are they doing that are getting it right throughout the test of time, you know?
Yeah, I think the leaders who are being successful these days are the ones who have finally made the realization that you've got to start with a good foundation, with clean data, with data that has everything in it that you need and nothing that you don't. The fields need to be filled in properly, indexed properly, stored wherever they need to go. All those kinds of things, because when you bump up AI against data that makes no sense, you're going to get results that make no sense. So it's going to help you once you come to that realization and you've invested the time and effort to get your data into a good place, then you should be getting some good results. And AI should be providing you and your company with benefits and good predictions. Many years ago, way before I got into Salesforce, I worked for an airline, and I remember the management of the airline didn't really have any models to tell them how profitable the company was being. And that's why
Oh,
they brought me in. They hired me to basically create this profitability model for them. They were trying to forecast the future without a historical basis, is kind of how I
oh
started
man.
describing things, and that's impossible. So I went in, I dug into the data, I spent hours and hours and weeks and literally probably months even pulling data from every single system that this airline was using into essentially Excel spreadsheets to do a ton of analysis and combining things and making sure everything made sense and finally presenting all of those findings to the management team. And ultimately, what they were able to figure out was where they're profitable, where they're not, what's good, what's bad, what's ugly, and all the things that they need to be changing because of the way the data was telling the story about the business. And I don't think that's changed at all from 30 years ago when that happened. I think the data and its impact is still there, and businesses who know how to properly harness and use the data that they already have are going to be the ones who really succeed.
Yeah, I think that's kind of reassuring, if I may, that the fact that, you know, data is the ground of everything. It's the foundation, and getting that right is really important. So, with all the shiny things that we'd say with AI, you know, I feel like we're coming back to a lot of our basics that, you know, keep your data clean, ensure that it
Hmm.
happens, know your use case for the scenario. So those things are really reassuring and very interesting to hear about this airline case where they didn't have historical data and wanted to know future returns. Sounds like an interesting project, Eric.
Oh yeah, it
Moving
definitely
on.
was.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Moving on to the next part, I'm just going to move into AI ethics and trusted AI, because um, there are conversations that have started now, and thankfully so about, the kind of regulatory frameworks that need to be placed, the fact that it needs to, the EU Act is now going to be into effect. There is a lot that's happening across. A lot of governments are now, coming and talking about AI, what needs to be done. There is um, it's getting real. There is a governance structure that is coming into all of this. So, moving on to this part, Cindy, you spent over a decade arguing for what you call trusted AI, auditable, transparent, ethical. Most of the market is still building the opposite. Why is it that this black box approach is so persistent, and why are people refraining from building auditable AI? What has your experience been in all of this?
Well, first I would do a build on your comments. There are many that are doing it right. I think that's
Okay,
very, very important to note that they
of course.
not purchasing solutions or vendor products that they cannot see explainability clearly and ensuring that they can audible, particularly in the financial services industry, right? um, we're
Mm,
very cautious because there's lots of regulations there. Certainly in the Canadian market, we've got the Finrock. We've got also the OC. Just the name escapes me for a second right now. But anyways, there are third-party regulators going in and looking at things very, very cautiously. I think maybe the other point is why so many people don't build the visibility into the structures is because it's hard to do, right? And that it depending on the AI methods that you're using, the ability to explain things, especially in deeper neural networks, can be much more convoluted to be able to ascertain, right? So what has to happen is to ensure that the data that's being aggregated is explainable and that the fields are defined and that the algorithmic methods are precise to solve the particular use case that is being determined to solve. And so you mitigate your risks there, not being able to explain things in terms of all of the roots that may be in particularly a deep neural network. Now, the market's evolving though too, right? Because anybody that's technical deeply would understand that that's just a matter of time where we'll have agents within the models monitoring and tracking things that are happening every nanosecond and looking at where the calculations are moving, right? So the
mhm,
market is evolving in its own sense making. Um, the other factor is that the legal system, as I mentioned earlier, does not have all of the teeth, the deep teeth to ensure that there are third party reviews and risk reviews on higher risk applications. There are higher level frameworks that if people want to govern AI effectively, whether that's and again, the European Union's framework, still not all the way through, but there is frameworks and there's good context. There's the NIST framework in the US. MIT's got really good frameworks. OECD, internationals have some good frameworks. And there's obviously ISO 42001 for those of you who like to have ISO certification. So what I'm trying to say is that in order to do this right, you really need to understand the use case that you're trying to do and ensure that you're not a lone pony and that you do have reviewers, whether those are third party advisors or whether you're having, like, the auditors are coming up the curves. The CFOs are really frustrated now because they've put a lot of investment out and there hasn't been a return, right? There really hasn't. And I totally agree with Surinder on your point that it is the art of the long view, right? And you're laying infrastructure and it's costly. And so people have to have a longer view for the return on investments. But unfortunately, that's not usually the case. And that's why, a lot of these programs have failed is they haven't built what it takes to fully productionalize and build a longer view horizon. But in simple answer to your question, people are lazy. Again, Atisha, people are pushing products into the market which have not had third-party reviews. Data sets are flawed on many, many levels, and it's a messy time. But there is a lot of good happening, and there's lots of use cases I can talk about that are really good and thoughtful as well. But I think the hype is over. It's time to get serious and to do this well. Um, yeah.
Just one thing I want to dig on before we move. You said that we don't have enough legal teeth in the matter. Can you expand a little bit on it? I found it an interesting um, point that I would like to bring that conversation or that perspective as well to it. If you could just add a little bit onto that.
Sure. Well, I think first of all, how legislation happens is one when there's legal suits, right? There's precedents that go on file. So if you look at the generative AI, if you want to call it the Wild West that's going on right now, right? When Anthropic was fined 1.5 billion, that was a bit of a toothache, right? And
Mm.
so, although that was in, I think, late 2024, and if so, I always follow the legal cases. So right now, as I said, OpenAI has close to either 80 or 90 legal cases for copyright infringement, trademark infringement. I think Mistral over in France has zero right now, which is interesting. It's open source, platform as a frontier model. So what is important is to understand it takes time for all the legal systems to wake up. And so right now, as the judges make, penalties, those are big wake up calls. And then they send ripples down into the corporations, right? To say, you know, am I going to do business with OpenAI with 100 legal cases, or am I going to do it with Anthropic, who've maybe you've got 12 or 20? I mean, it's one of these. It's what So I think smart governance people at the top are asking the hard questions, and procurement is waking up too, and which is about time. And procurement's kind of been totally oblivious to the deals that are going on and not having I think the teeth that they need. I think there's a lot of rethinking of their roles and responsibilities in the age of AI. Yeah, so I could talk on this on many dimensions for quite some time, as you can already gather. But
Yeah.
that gives you some
I'm
some
happy to hear.
some color commentary, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, but that's interesting to know. And I like the fact that you threw in some numbers for us to visualize, with so can see how up to date you are with your information. Moving on to you, Eric, you have had practitioners in your community, and you must have wrestled with the concept of data ethics in your day-to-day work, privacy, consent, all of that. Who sees what, what's happening with data? What is now changing with AI in terms of all of that, with the data privacy, with the ethics? What is the change that you're observing in terms of all of it? Is there a change? Is there something that we should be alarmed about? Or is there any advice that you have for us?
I think if nothing else, it's bringing that concept back to the forefront, emphasizing it more so than it has been in the past, from the perspective of using AI. There's been some conversations that I've seen and heard around using generic AI, for lack of a better term, rather than specific AI, where it's based upon your own data as opposed to based upon generalized data from across a larger population. And I think there's some risks involved with potentially trying to make decisions about your specific organization when you're not using just your data, when you're trying to assume things about your organization that may be based upon the performance of many companies that are not you, that are not your organization. So I feel like that's a sticking point a little bit right now, that some people and some leaders have finally come to grips with that reality.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Erica, because our approach has always been unique AI models relevant for the business in real time. And when you just pick certain attributions and generalize, you're not getting the cream of the crop. Kudos to you to point that out. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, that is an
absolutely.
interesting perspective, and I feel like you articulated it really well. Sureen, moving on to you, because we're providing to customers when our team is implementing AI for a customer, how is it, where do the ethics show up in the way that we provide our solutions? I mean, I'm talking about the design decisions that we make, that you ensure that we are making, where is AI ethics showing up in the work that we do?
Yeah, so I'll come to this question little later. I just wanted to add one point to
Yeah, of
the
course,
earlier
please.
fines and also legal and all that, right? So what
Yes,
happens
please.
if the problem is bigger, the solution and the controls will be better. Example, I'll give you. Enron created a bigger issue that created Sarbanes-Oxley, and then entire industry created of kind of auditors, internal, external, and all that, right? So bigger companies created because of that kind of bigger problem. Here also, we are at the point where now people are seeing problems, people are seeing a lot of other things, right? Cindy is right. Now we are at the inflection point. Now act now, right? Basically, we are at that mode where all the problems, everybody is seeing it now. What is now immediate, right? Now this is the time. Now we clearly see all the guardrails coming in, all the controls coming in, everything kicks in. Earlier, GRC, Sarbanes-Oxley, and entire compliance teams will refine their frameworks and refine, again, add parameters to it and kind of come up with agentic enablement into that existing framework, so that what happens is the acceleration happens very fast because the problem is bigger. Now the solutions has to be faster and better. So that's the mode we are in. Again, going back to our your question, so when we go and ask any of the customer right now in today's world, what's happening is,
Mm.
see, everybody knows AI in the sense it's a faster compute, higher performance, and productivity is going up. But the measurability, accountability is kind of nowhere, basically. Because I have seen for my organization as well as I have seen for a couple of customer organizations, what's happening is even when you give all the uh, needed GPTs, Geminis, and all these cursors and Claude. What's happening now is the number of people kind of doing the work is getting done the same amount, whereas the productivity is gone up basically. And again, I have seen few places where kind of the workforce reduction happened, but in reality, the outcome, when you look at the outcome, it's almost the same outcome. Doesn't matter like how much we improved here so far, but in the future what's going to happen is because we are at the point now, even if we are able to make agents work for the customers, they are not either production ready, or even if they are production ready, that exceptions that it is doing the right thing or not. Example, it is doing 90% right, 10% wrong, right? So the measuring that 10%, what is wrong, why it is wrong, and how to make it right, right? That's where a lot of new jobs gets created now. Basically, making sure understanding the problem of like where it is failing and all that, right? A lot of QA jobs, a lot of AI. Making AI work, right? It is not a easy thing because at least people means we know we understand each other and all that. Understanding agents becomes cryptic. You need to understand bigger level, intellectual level, to make sure that's kind of doing it and or not. So in short, what I wanted to say is a lot of control comes in play, and a lot of new jobs created to make AI work to fit into the frameworks of the legal governance and compliance.
That's a very interesting perspective, Sureen, and thank you for sharing that with us. I feel like, um, in general, also how you were saying, right? I think this probably adds on or to the point that Cindy was making about explainability, right? Like you said, that difference that comes about and trying to identify that and understand that. That's really interesting. Moving on to the next part of it, we're going to go to talking about emotions, mood, and the human side, because I feel like we need to give some conversations and part to that. As someone who's working in AI, having a conversation in AI, going to be honest and admit that I'm scared about what's coming about, that I'm scared about what the ecosystem is going to look like, how things are going to change. And just to be able to get an opportunity to have that conversation with three people from leadership, that's we're uncertain about the work. There's a lot of research that's happening. There are a lot of different takes. Cindy, your book had the utopian and dystopian view about things, hoping obviously for not the for the better one, but that is certain. We're scared, and I feel like it would be nice for leadership to get that insight, for all of us to probably just have avenues to discuss that. To move into that, Cindy, I noticed that you built mood insights during the pandemic. That was a time when I feel like a lot of mental health was conversations were happening. The world was in a really different place. Take us back to that moment and tell us that what were you noticing about humans, in the industry that was just what was happening? Take us through that process and that time.
Okay, well, I think the whole catalyst for, I think the point on humans, I kind of want to start there before I talk about mood. And
Yeah, of course.
there's no question that there is a place for humans in AI enablements for a long, long time. However, there will be an evolution where eventually we'll have symbiotic integration, and it's inevitable, right? As we become more robotically enabled, the reality is there's only two areas left where AI does not exceed human intelligence, and that's in complex math and in basic reading comprehension. And we expect that those two gaps will close in probably the next 3 to 5 years, right? Just
Okay.
the speed of evolution. But humans at this point in time have built businesses and organizations that weren't built for AI enablements. And it's going to take, a long, long time, like certainly well past my lifetime to have the complete ubiquity at AI infrastructure at scale. So it's an interesting time as builders. It's a context that we can't ignore. But where humans come into play is to recognize, and I'm just finishing a piece of research, and I'll be issuing this actually probably this week, on what makes humans unique, and to really
I'm
understand,
very looking forward to that one.
and what makes humans really unique. And point number one is we're made of flesh and bones, and very different, right? AI is mathematical and based on calculations. Humans have incredible feelings, right? Very deeply. And we have contextual understanding across many dimensions. And how we each see something as a person is going to be different because our mental models and our brains are all hardwired differently. So my experiences are all different than yours. And so we see things. Some people see more and some people see less. AI is incredible at crunching large volumes of data and recognizing patterns at a speed that no human can possibly compete with. So, what's important is honestly, humans have to decide where do humans fit and make some very clear call outs. And it's no more complex than that. If an organization has highly routine processes and they see it's highly repetitive, they can erase all of those jobs in a nanosecond. Let's not be foolish about this topic that we're dealing with. Highly routine, highly repetitive jobs can all be automated, no question. So it's on behalf of leaders that they really need to think about their ecosystem and the world they want to create. And obviously, there is a place for humans. I do worry about the number of jobs that will be available because we're moving into a higher order. Um, and I think that's a very important discussion. A higher order of knowledge workers, a higher order of skills. And if you look at, like, I've been following where are the jobs that we're losing and where the jobs aren't. And it's all in the youth area, Atisha. I mean, it really is. You know,
Oh,
so that, I think I think you have a right to be concerned at the same time. And I think as the statistics come in and the labor and where the jobs are being created or not created, I do think, there will be many more conversations. You just have to talk to parents. And I can't tell you how many people say, where should I send my child if they're going to computing science? And I immediately say, if they've got the aptitude, can they focus on robotic engineering? Because guess what? As much as we're talking about AI, we're talking about now cobots entering our lives, and we're at the beginning of that cycle, and we're further back there. But you just have to look at the aging workforce across North America and our healthcare systems, and we're not going to be able to evolve without other support systems beyond humans. So, anyways, there's a lot going on, Atisha. You know, the reality I always say to young people is learn as much as you can to remain relevant, and learning how to use AI and also lead from an ethical point of view and to have a voice. You will always have a job. But for those who don't try to learn, it's like, and I hate to think back, but I will go back to the days, and you have to kind of close your eyes, although I wasn't there in the prairie days when, the Midwest, and there were no cars or there were no planes and the railroads were coming in. But
Oh man.
if you couldn't get off your horse and learn another mode of transportation, you were left behind. What's different this time is the speed that this is happening at scale. And we're now at a stage where AI is seen as a weapon for countries. And if you read and followed the recent development with Anthropic and the US government, uh,
Yeah.
frontier models with the new ones, we're dealing, with some other dynamics too on this topic. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was reading about mythos and there was so much that was happening with that. But thank you. This conversation, it is a little, I think, more than reassuring just to be able to have the avenue to discuss something like this. Eric, coming to you, you talk to people in the ecosystem all the time. If I have to just be honest with you and ask you, what's the sentiment that's going on about AI right now? Ranging from leaders to new people in the industry. You converse with so many people. What is the public conversation or the sense that you're getting about things? Give us a snapshot of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have crossed the threshold from concerned about AI and it being scary to being knowledgeable enough to realize that now it's not necessarily the beast that's going to take over everything and destroy the world.
Yeah.
It's going to be out there, and people are starting to realize there's a lot of good things that can come from the use of AI when it's done correctly, when the data is the right way, when you have the proper governance, all the things that we've already talked about through this half an hour or so. When you wrap all of that stuff around it, uh, AI is probably succeeding and doing what it should be and helping organizations grow and succeed and do more of their mission or whatever, sell more of their product or whatever it is that company's doing. It's finding its own little niche and helping organizations do the things they need to be doing.
That actually is very reassuring to hear, Eric. Just the saying that like people have moved from worry to now actually beginning to learn about it. And I feel like that the more we learn about it and get some knowledge, the fear reduces because it's not as unknown. I mean, it always will be unknown, but that's kind of nice to hear. Thank you for that. Um,
Mhm.
Sureen, I remember you had mentioned, one of our customers was wrestling with this. How do you fairly gauge contribution? There is a certain amount of culture that you need to balance, because you're leading a company in two very different geographies. How is that happening? How are you as a leader ensuring that the human gets viewed, that you're respecting and really the cultures, the geographies, there's a lot of diversity that comes about. But then again, it is a company that stands together because of these two parts. How are you managing all of it? How are you tackling the humans on this side of it?
Yeah, so two things I am doing. Again, every company might be doing the same way, and every
Yeah.
country might be doing the same way because you have to take care of your family, you have to take care of your employees, you have to take care of this, right? It's nothing new. We are planting the seed now. Though we may not see the benefits, reap the benefits now, the plant has to grow now, kind of reap the fruits and all, right? It could be next generation and all. That's where I think you see the magic happening. And definitely, I see future is bright. Again, we may not see the fruits immediately. So the same note, I'm doing some research and I'm reading a lot of places, right? What job creation is going to happen is in 2027, Q3, Q4, a lot of jobs get created because by then all this noise is over. Now let's make agents work. Let's work on it, let's
Mm.
solve the problem, right? Nothing, all this is gone, now make it work, right? For that, I'm making my teams ready. And again, as Cindy mentioned, right, learn as much as you can, kind of create as much as new things as possible, and be ready for the next wave when that is coming, right? People look at you as the again pioneer, plus you know exactly what to do, how to make it work in a shorter time and create the value for this. So right now what I'm doing is with my existing customers, I am partnering with my employees. I am asking them to go and build creative way of applications, creative way of agents, and I am building asking them to build the command centers where it measures each and every minute detail of agent, what it is doing, and human being, what it is doing. And when you exactly know what it is doing, you have the measurable, trackable, everything, right? It becomes easy to know where we have to improve, where we have to create the value, what is not working, what's working, right? So then I think you can add a lot of value to customers. And I'm partnering with the customers here, just kind of understanding their pain, and we are creating solutions for them. May not be just one platform, and it could be across the platforms. We are building solutions that fits to the customer needs, and those are all small use cases. Forget about all these big LLMs and big racks and all that, right? The small use cases is where the magic happens. But to solve that, leveraging this power compute and all that, right, it accelerates. That's pretty much. But the end of the day, you had to do your homework, you had to do solve the problem. Solving the problem is utmost important, and adding compute, adding all this power, adding all this intelligence accelerates the growth. But solving the problem is utmost important. Thank you.
Thank you for reiterating on that, Suren. You're right about the fact, and you said that even with you're giving them the avenue to have creative solutions, build creative solutions for all of us as employees. So I guess to just keep us, learning, growing, and doing on with that. Just moving on to the last section, finally, the human ground truth. I just want to just wrap up with all of you and talk about and just, ask like some quick questions with you all and just then wrap it up. So, Cindy, what is a question that you're sitting with most in these days? Like for you, if I have to ask you, what is a human now? What is the value in being a human? What is that question taking you? What are the thoughts that come up to you? Like, could you share that with us?
Sure. Well, I've been researching and thinking about this topic for a bit. And as I said, I'm releasing a piece of work on that actually tomorrow. And I was finally editing, I think it was last night. I think it goes back to the point I've already mentioned. I think leaders, boards, have to get clear in their mind their own corporate purpose and what their responsibility is to humans, period, especially around their ecosystem. Organizations that succeed over time and that live over time, they're not just inwardly focused. They're looking at the schools, they're looking at their customers, they're looking at their supply chains. They are reaching out to learn from one another. This is a time where you cannot do this alone. And if any organization feels that they can, they are going to fail miserably. Right? So, a lot of the focus here, what I love about humans is humans really value relationships and trusted tribes. And I think people have to dig deep and look at the nature of their tribes and the depth of their knowledge in that tribe. And if it's not sufficient enough, then lean in to talk to Surin, lean in to talk to Eric, who's got his ear to the ground. And and I think, the other point this is a very serious point that I'll clearly close with because I know you want to engage others. We have to understand that we have an economic imbalance across the globe and power bases. I mean, if you look at Nvidia's valuation, it's 7 trillion currently. And if you look
Yeah.
at, I'm in Canada, the valuation of our country, I think is 2.52 trillion.
Wow.
So I mean, if you add up the Magnificent Seven, right, they have more control than most countries around the world. Okay, so just absorb that. And then the concentration of that dominance is very much in the US. And then obviously we've got China, right? So, we're at a time where there's a lot of lobbying and holding back. And I think we're going to see a huge rise in citizen engagement, and people have to speak up. Parents have to speak up. We have to change. It takes 5 years to change a university curriculum. Talk about an institution that's going to fail over time. So we need broader strategic perspectives of the society that we want to build and the communities and the countries we want to work with and partner with as well. So, there's a lot going on right now in the geopolitical landscape. But again, it's important we look at the ecosystem and the stakeholders, and we have to uplift everyone and not leave anybody behind. And for those that are less skilled, and they're like, let's not underestimate thousands and thousands of people will lose their jobs because of robots and AI. I mean, I'm not, and so how are we uplifting and re-educating that talent? Are we going to train them on how to do maintenance on robots? Like, we better get going. So,
Yeah,
so I
I
look
think
at a lot of meta, economic dynamics in parallel here, and yeah, so
yeah, that's very interesting, right? Like you said, there were strategic perspective is really important over here. So thank you for that. Eric, to ask you, just that um in terms of the community that you've built and seen and everything, what is the future that you see for how we evolve as communities? How important are they in this time, with AI and everything, what is the benefit that you've noticed about communities?
Yeah, I think Cindy sort of touched on it just a minute ago when she was talking about uh, the humans around there still, and I think that's the
Yeah.
key. I mean, I feel like the job of the community is to keep humans in contact with other humans,
Mm-hmm.
and it helps us to realize that no matter what's going on in our daily lives, in our work lives, with AI or with politics or with anything out there, having another fellow human to have a conversation with who may be experiencing a lot of the same things you are and not talking about it outwardly. If the two of you can click on one little subject, on one little topic, you're both going to feel better about what's going on in the day at the end of those conversations, and ultimately the world is going to become a better place because of those conversations and the interactions of people.
very true.
Yeah, that's um any interesting with like the community that's going on and everything, are you noticing a change in people? Are you just noticing a sense of belonging? Like, are people more connected with each other in this time of adversity?
Yeah, I think it's shifting some. It was interesting back during the COVID times, when there wasn't a lot of in-person stuff going on, and people had to try to rely on online communities or LinkedIn conversations or things like that. And to some degree, I think some people are still having a little bit of a hard time moving back into the face-to-face world after sitting at home and working from their desk at home for so many years now. They've kind of gotten set in their ways almost, and cracking
Yeah.
that eggshell one more time is seems to be a little difficult for some people to get them back out into the world of the humans.
Back out into the world of the humans in traffic. But yeah, you're right about there has
Yeah.
been a certain change that's come with the pandemic and how we approach things. And it's going to change slowly. Finally, Suren, coming to you, you sit between a team between Bay Area, India. You have different kinds of teams. You have remote team working. You have people working from urban areas, rural areas. What is the ground truth looking like in this case? That how are you trying to ensure that as an employee, you're creating a culture where all of these are respected and you're still able to meet the goals.
Yeah. So one thing what happened again, all the it's the byproducts of COVID, working
Yeah.
remote, and all this, right? Now boundaries are no longer boundaries anymore. It's all kind of anybody can work from anywhere and all that. Right? That opened up a lot of rural areas to grow, flourish, and people live healthy. And so a lot of companies even started investing back into the areas of their again, founders, especially leaders, they kind of go back and start the organizations from their hometowns. Basically, I'm just giving you few examples. Right there, what's happening is you are having best of everything, and as long as you have connectivity and you have like good schools, one or two schools, and you're giving employment, you are kind of taking care of that community, and you are providing everything needed, and at the end you are accomplishing the same goal, common goal of kind of making more done with the same set of people. Here where agents can scale, agents can repeat work, and agents can analyze, but the vision, wisdom, and also the relationships ethics are part of the human differentiation.
Yeah, thank you so much. So finally, to ask all of you all one last question where I just want some quick answers. For anyone listening to this, why people who are overwhelmed by the AI noise, what is the one thing that you want to tell them? Cindy, we'll start with you. Someone who's overwhelmed by AI, just moving on, what is something that you would want to tell them?
I think if you're overwhelmed, you need to find a mentor.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, so find a friend, do what humans do. Find a friend who knows more than you. Reverse mentoring is really important, I think, as well right now, right? I think smart leaders will start picking up very young people, that are innovating and being creative, and they don't know what all the fuss about. But then again, we have to understand they don't have the full bandwidth of knowledge either, right? But yeah,
Yeah,
you just got to get learning, and everybody has to learn. I don't know how else to say it. There's lots of free courses out there for AI everywhere. So there's no excuse, but we have a responsibility to ask all of your friends. I tell people that are, that have the knowledge worker background that, they better get certified. They better stand out. Um, so, we have to
yeah,
uplift everybody. I don't know how else to say it. You got to educate, you got to learn. And for those that aren't able to learn, we really go.
yeah. Thank you so much for that. Eric, moving on to you, what do you think if someone's listening to this? How do we overwhelmed by the AI noise? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I think I'd simply tell them take a step back for a minute and relax a bit. Just look at what's going on. Think about the connections that are out there, the efforts and the world around you, and pretty much as Cindy put it, um, find a friend if you need one. Find someone to have that small conversation with, and realize that the giant waves always start out as a small drop in the water.
Oh, that's a powerful line. Thank you for that. The giant waves always start with a small drop of water. Thank you. And finally, Suren, coming to you, with anyone listening with overwhelmed by the AI noise, what would you tell them?
Yeah, so seniors plus anybody 40 plus year, I'll just tell them to unlearn what they learned, relearn the new ways of doing it. And for the younger generation, just kind of keep learning and follow the trend. Trend is my friend, and automatically things will fall in place when the right time comes. So definitely what happens is you see the light at the end of the tunnel, maybe kind of middle or later part of 2027. After that, you don't have to look back.
Thank you so much, everybody.
So
Yeah, of course, Cindy.
I have one quick build that it's really important.
Of course.
This is a time where everybody's got to really look after their mental health and well-being, because the speed of transformation is much greater than the human mind can handle. The
That
human
is true.
mind was not hardwired to move at the pace that we're accelerating, expecting them to perform. We have 50% of North Americans that are between the ages of 19 to 30 have had 1 to 2 mental health illnesses right now. Those are the stats. High rates.
50%. Wow, that's
So we all need to look after what is unique about a human. Humans need some space for emotional relief. So hug a tree would probably be the big build, and get closer to nature. But you really do need to be mindful of the health and the mental well-being of every single person right now.
I think that was the perfect thing to end it on, Cindy, to just
Yeah,
bring it on to surface. That is true that
yeah.
a very alarming statistic, and just to put it out there that mental health is important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I just And thank you so much, all of you all. This was a great conversation. I'm so glad that you all gave me your time for this. And
So
I'm so happy that I get to learn so much from all of you and like all of you experienced people in your career. Thank you for taking the time out. Really, really appreciate this.
thank you for inviting me.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.